Hi, I'm Nairi, and I'm going to be a freshman at MIT this year.
Okay, perfect. Before we dive into your story, I have to ask, like, when you got that MIT acceptance letter, what was your first thought?
My first thought, honestly, was, is this a mistake? I'm not going to lie, I was in my bed, just like preparing to get rejected. And then I opened the button to see the letter and I saw the confetti and I applied early action, so I was like, wait, there shouldn't be confetti if I was deferred. And then I
Yeah.
read the first sentence of the letter and I was just screamed like, oh my god, I got in.
That's good. I think it was very similar for me as well, but I was like playing games with my friends, and then I got a call from my counselor that the admission letters are out. You gotta check it out. Then, yeah. One of my best days for sure. All right, let's start with your background. Where are you from, and how does someone from your location end up at MIT?
Yeah, so I'm from a pretty like I'm from a town that's close to Boston, so I'm in Mass. So it's kind of like suburban. And I go to a small public high school where I mean the last person that got into MIT was like 6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, not a lot of people apply, but
Mm-hmm.
I will say I have noticed that in the past couple of years, I've seen more and more kids from my school get into top colleges.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that has something to do with them trying to diversify like what schools they're taking people from or if it's just a coincidence, but yeah. So I really didn't expect to get in mainly because I didn't think my extracurriculars were impressive enough. I mean, I was valedictorian out of like about 200
Mm-hmm.
students, and I did take like 13 AP classes. I got fives on all of them. So like I wasn't worried about my academics at all, but I knew that there would be a lot of kids applying to MIT who would have these like crazy like international awards that I just didn't have.
For sure. And like, what kind of high school did you go to?
It was like a small public school.
Okay, okay. And when did MIT first enter your mind as a possibility?
So it was the summer when I was going into junior year. I just started visiting colleges and like I decided to visit MIT first because it was just close. I'm very
Mm-hmm.
close. And I remember we got to the tour a little bit early, so we went inside the bookstore. I was wearing like a shirt with the James Webb Space Telescope. I'm like really into astronomy.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember like when I was checking out my book, like the cashier said that he really liked my shirt, and I just thought like this is like my community. I just feel like a lot of people would kind of like understand me and my nerdiness, and that wouldn't be something that I had to hide because in high school, I did feel like I was different, but at MIT, I just felt like so many people were like me. And so that was really when I started to consider it. And it became even more appealing when I did this program. MIT has this program for local high school students called MIT Prime Circle.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, I studied a topic I did not theory with another high school student and an MIT undergrad math major. And so I was just kind of like in the environment and I was just like looked around me and saw all the chalkboards covered with equations and I just felt at home.
Okay, perfect. That's good that you got in MIT. And like, are you also doing astronomy as a major in MIT?
I'm gonna do astronomy as a minor and physics as my major.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, MIT actually doesn't have an astronomy major, but there are a lot of astronomy classes like inside the physics department.
Okay,
Every school kind of does that a little differently.
perfect. All right, let's shift gears real quick and let's talk about your numbers. So I'm going to talk about like what were your stats, GPA, test scores, and everything.
Yeah, so my weighted GPA, it was like 4.77.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I was a valedictorian out of like 200 students. My SAT, my like non-super score was 1540, my super score was 1560. Let's see, what else? 13 APs, but like 15 tests because AP Physics C has two different AP tests, and I also took the the Calculus BC test without taking the class because I had taken Calculus AB the year before. So 15 tests, 15 AP tests, fives on all of them.
Perfect. And let's talk about the SAT. How many times did you take the SAT? And what was the journey like? Were you like a natural test taker or did you grind it out?
Yeah, so I ended up taking the SAT 3 times, but I actually didn't do as well on the third time. Basically, the first time it was with the old SAT.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the fall of my junior year, and I wanted to take the old SAT because I wasn't sure like if the new SAT would be like more difficult. So I tried the old SAT and I got a higher maths, and then the two other ones I took later were the digital SAT. I found that I got a higher math score on the old SAT, but a higher reading score on the new SAT. But I don't know. I don't know if like they're actually different
Mm-hmm.
levels of difficulty, but that was just me. And I'll say that like I've always been a natural test taker in both like English and math. Like I am a STEM person because I'm a lot more passionate about it, but I've also been very good at English and like reading and things like that. So I didn't study a lot, but I kind of felt like I fixated too much on the score, which was why I took it a third time when I didn't really need to. So I will say that like the SAT isn't everything. Like once you reach a certain threshold,
Mm-hmm.
there's no point in going further because you're better off spending your time doing extracurriculars and really showing who you are as a person. And like it's something I like to think about as like the point of diminishing returns. Like you can only
Yep.
put so much effort in to like get to a certain level of success, but once you put in more, it just becomes counterproductive. And I'll say like that's not only for the SAT, that's pretty much like for anything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And like I think a lot of people get into the rut of like, oh, maximizing my SAT score or ACT score. But it's like I've interviewed so many people who got into Harvard with like 1400 SAT or 1470 SAT. So first of all, I think it's very important to look at your high school and your demographics and how they're compared to your score. Secondly, I think it's just like a check mark.
Yeah,
So if you're just like if you're above 1450 and the rest part of your application is good enough, I think you have
right.
pretty much an even shot at all of these schools as well.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, so let's talk about your APs. How many APs did you take? And like what were your grades on that?
Yeah, so I took 13 AP classes in school. I got, let's see, I got a mix of like A's and A pluses in most of them, except for AP English Literature and Composition. I got an A minus in
Mm-hmm.
that one because the teacher, was very intense. I was actually very proud
Yeah.
of that grade. That was probably the grade I was proudest of in my whole high school career just because that teacher was so tough. And yeah, I took, and obviously, like, my grades in, like, the history ones tended to be, like, A's rather than A pluses. There was a lot of the STEM ones I got A pluses in. And I took, like, APs in a variety of subjects. Like, I did my freshman year I didn't take any because my school doesn't let freshmen take APs, and my sophomore year I took three. I took AP Physics 1, AP US History, AP Calculus AB, and then the next year junior year I took five APs. I took AP Chemistry, AP English Literature and Composition, AP Statistics, AP Physics C, and AP European History.
Mm-hmm.
And I also took the BC test. I just like self-studied the rest of AP Calculus BC that wasn't in AB, which wasn't a lot. So I did that. And then my senior year, I also took 5 AP classes. I took AP English Language and Composition. I took AP Psychology, AP Biology, AP Music Theory, and AP Computer Science.
Okay, perfect. That's a very rigorous class schedule. And based on that, what was the hardest class you took that made you think, oh, this might actually hurt my chances?
Probably AP English Literature and Composition. Again, this is really funny actually because I wrote one of my MIT essays about how I failed my first essay test in that class. And like, I know that might sound kind of weird, like, oh my God, why would you tell MIT that you failed a test? But, you know, I talked about really showing that I wasn't a perfectionist and I was willing to learn and grow, because I feel like a lot of schools, especially schools like MIT, that have had problems in the past with students adjusting to, like, failing for the first time, you really want to show them that you can handle it and you know how to pick yourself back up again. And yeah, basically that class, English, history was tough for me. That's always been my worst subject. Like, I remember, and it was funny because my US history class and my European history class, they were taught very differently. And it was just like due to the teachers' different styles. APUSH, I had a lot more homework and discussions in class, whereas there were a lot of in-class lectures, but less homework. So yeah, I just say in general, like the humanities ones were more difficult, but I really wanted to show that I could step outside of my comfort zone academically.
For sure, for sure. Was there like any grade or score in your academic career that made you panic about your MIT dreams?
Yeah, so I said that my super score for the SAT is 1560. And it was really the split between math and reading that made me panic. I got a 780 on each. And basically my main concern was like that I didn't have a perfect 800 on the math SAT, because like I knew like so many people like at MIT had that, and I was just like, oh my God, like, are they gonna think I'm like bad at math? But I just realized that like even though compared to other MIT students, like my SAT math score wasn't like amazing, I had other ways to show that I was really good at math based on like AP tests, things I did outside of school, that program where I study knot theory and things like that. So I'll say that like one negative thing that's like below average for that school doesn't necessarily destroy your chances, as long as you have another way to show that you're competent in that subject area.
For sure, for sure. I think this gives a lot of context about like what goes into the academics part of a profile. Before we move on to extracurriculars, would you like to give like a piece of advice to someone who's looking to apply to a school like MIT, just before we wrap up?
So I'll say like this is gonna sound counterintuitive, and there's actually a blog post about this on MIT's admissions website, but don't go through high school with the goal of getting into MIT. That blog post was like applying to MIT like sideways, because when you try to shape everything around a goal like that, a goal that doesn't only depend on you and that you can only do so much to control, then, you know, it really just takes away a lot of that freedom. Like, I did a lot of things in high school that that didn't seem like they would help me get into MIT, but I think they actually did. Like, for example, I like singing. I sang in like my church choir. Like, that's something that like, you know, it's not impressive, but you know, it showed that I was really like connecting with my community and like my culture, since I'm Armenian, and you know, that's like a big part of our culture. And just like, don't be afraid to do things just because you don't think it'll help you get in. I think I spent a lot of time worrying about like my extracurriculars being the right ones or the like or if they were good enough, but I'd say just do it because at the end of the day, there's no right way to go about getting into a place like MIT. Someone could do the exact same things as me, have the exact same stats, and just be like slightly different, and they might get rejected because, that's just how it works. And adding on to that, I would say don't have a dream school if you can help it, because although MIT was my first choice and like after the fact I'll admit it was my dream school, I didn't like let myself really idle because I could have very easily gotten rejected just based on, who else was applying and what they needed. And really, when you're going to visit colleges, try, even if they're like your safety schools, try to be enthusiastic about it and say, oh, like, worst case scenario, I can go here and it'll still be good. Because like, I think that was like a really difficult thing for me, was just like accepting that like no matter like how much I did, I couldn't control, the outcome entirely. And so I think just accepting that just really helps your mental health. And mental health is really important when you're applying to these schools, because if your mental health is off, then your performance is going to be off. And so I think like self-care and really taking care of your mental health, even though it might not seem like it's gonna help, is really gonna help in the long run, because that's how you really become your best self.
For sure, for sure. Now, let's do a slight deep dive into your extracurriculars. What's the one thing you did outside of class that you think made MIT admissions officers stop and take a deep look at your application?
Yeah, so I would say it was this, I did a lot of stuff in like restorative justice, and it was basically, I just had like this opportunity from my school, this was like at the end of my sophomore year, I found out that my school was doing this free trip to Montgomery, Alabama, and it would be like all about like restorative justice, and we visited like museums and stuff, and within that we did a lot of restorative justice training. And I think the reason why that stood out to MIT admissions officers is because, especially in like this political climate, people need to be able to kind of like mediate and resolve conflict in a healthy way, and I feel like colleges need that now more than ever. And so even though at the time like it might not have seemed like something MIT would have like been impressed with, I think it did like make them see me as more of like a full person, because like even though yes, MIT is like STEM, you want to also have other passions outside of that and show that like, you're a complete person.
For sure. Could you also like walk us through some of your extracurriculars to see what got you into MIT?
Yeah, so I did a fair amount of like academic extracurriculars. Like again, I did that MIT Prime Circle program where I studied knot theory, and we wrote a paper and gave a talk about it. So I think that was like some good like experience with more advanced level math. I also was really interested in exoplanets specifically, and so I did a lot of stuff with that. I did like an independent study where I like read a lot of papers about it, and then I wrote like a review article, and then like the next summer I did a research project where I studied an exoplanet candidate from the TESS mission. So it was really something that I built off of, and I did multiple things around the same theme. And it was a similar thing with like the restorative justice stuff. Not only did I do the Alabama trip and become a student leader in my school for restorative justice, I tried to start this club, but there wasn't a lot of interest in my small school that already had so many clubs that I turned it into an Instagram account. And it was really about like techniques to discuss difficult topics with people who have different viewpoints. And so again, that was like kind of grouped together as like a theme of like social justice and really communicating with other people. And then I had another kind of theme, which was singing. I was in my a cappella group in my high school. I was in my church choir. I also did this like district choir where you had to audition to get in. And my senior year, although this was after I had gotten into MIT, I got into my all-state choir, which like required like a separate audition, so that was like extremely competitive.
For sure. A lot of your activities had a lot of impact and they were very deep. What would you suggest to someone who's looking to get into MIT or like all of the top schools who are like freshmen right now? How do you think they should go about building this kind of depth in their activities?
Yeah, so I would say the key is to really choose something that you're passionate about, because if you choose something that like you don't actually like, then it's just gonna feel like a lot more work and you're gonna dread doing it, and then it's just not going to have as much of an impact and you're not gonna enjoy it as much. But if you do something that you actually care about and you enjoy doing, then it's not gonna feel like work. It's gonna be fun and like it's gonna be something that you look forward to. Like, it didn't do any like Olympiads or anything like that, even though like I was like concerned that like that would harm my chances at MIT, mainly because like my school didn't really have like an Olympiad team or like things like that, and I wasn't really like passionate about like competitions and stuff like that, so I didn't like force myself to do it just so that it would impress admissions officers. So I would say like don't force yourself to do something just because you think it will look good, because something that you actually enjoy will actually be even better for you in the long run.
For sure. I think this
So
gives a
just
lot
like
of
take advantage of what your school has.
Okay, I get that a lot as well. Like, take advantage of what, like, in terms of APs as well. Like, you're not supposed to take more APs than what your school offers, you know. So, yeah, it's very important to just be as competitive as you can in your school. Okay, another question. When did you realize you needed to step up your extracurricular game?
It was like the middle of my sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
I actually didn't really have anything in terms of extracurriculars besides like my a cappella group and like doing like my school musicals. I guess because I just hadn't really thought about it. I was just focused so much on my academics. And when I first realized it, I just started panicking because I feel like you see on social media, you like a lot of people say, oh, like if you don't start like freshman year, then like it's going to be impossible to get in. So I would say like don't like panic over things you see on social media and advice like that, because like yes, it is helpful to start as early as you can, but even if you start like as late as me, like the middle of my sophomore year, if you work hard enough, you'll be able to create a great extracurricular profile.
And what do you think was absolutely useless for college extracurriculars that you think people should avoid?
Yeah, so I would say like doing like really random school clubs and community service that like didn't really make that much of an impact or like align with your values or what you talk about in your essays. Like, I think one of the reasons why I didn't have a lot of extracurriculars my freshman year and like the first half of my sophomore year is because I wasn't really into a lot of my school's clubs. And I feel like people shouldn't feel obligated to only do stuff in their school and school clubs, because you can also do stuff in your broader community. And
Okay, let's wrap up this extracurricular section. Let's talk about your main essay. So, what was it about?
yeah, so my like Common App essay, I mean, it wasn't, the MIT application doesn't like have like the long Common App essay, but my Common App essay was about, I basically framed it around like a metaphor of like an optical illusion and like how you see something one way but then you change your perspective and you see things another way, and I basically use that as like a metaphor for like lessons I've learned in life to like look at things from a different perspective.
Okay. And like how many essay topics did you go through before landing on the one?
I would say like probably like 4 or 5. It was, it was like definitely a work in progress. And I think one of the hardest parts about it was that I wanted to put like everything in it. Like I had a hard time just focusing on like one thing because there was just like so much I wanted to say.
For sure. Okay, and like why did you think that this story would stand out among thousands of others?
I thought it would stand out mainly because it was like very honest, and it talked about it talked about hardships I've overcome, but not in a way that was too detailed. And I think that was something that I had a hard time with because like you want to show colleges that like if you have like kind of hardships that you've gone through, some people say to talk about that in your college essay, but also like it's important not to be too like I guess pessimistic in the way that you talk about it. So I think I really like framed it in a way that was hopeful and optimistic.
Okay. Makes sense. All right, let's move on and let's talk about supplemental essays. So tell us about your supplemental essay journey. Which ones were the hardest? How did you research for them? Everything.
Yeah, so the hardest ones were probably the ones that were just very like open-ended and kind of metaphorical. Like specifically I'll talk about like the U Chicago essays. Like I was just like, I don't know, I was just like, it was so difficult to like figure out what to write about because there were just so many options. And so I think I did better with just like the straightforward, like right to the point prompt, which was really like what the MIT essays were like. It wasn't about necessarily like using the most flowery language or metaphors. It was just about like showing who you really were. And for researching supplemental essays and like especially for like the why us essays, I looked a lot, on like websites, social media. If I didn't do tours of the place, I would watch like virtual info sessions because, some of those places, they were really far away from me. And I really focused on parts of that college's mission and community that really aligned with what I was already doing. And everything else, I think the most important thing is to really like connect everything. And yeah, so sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
So yeah, supplemental essays, just like really be yourself and try not to worry too much about necessarily like impressing them, but just be yourself. And I know that's like kind of cliche, everyone says that, but it really is what works.
Perfect. Before we wrap up the essay part of the application, what do you think helped you out the most? What advice would you give to someone who's starting, and when did you start writing as well?
Yeah, so I started writing at the end of my junior year. Not supplemental essays, but like the big Common App like personal statement kind of essay, and my school like actually had it as like an assignment for like English class at the end of the year. So I was kind of like whether I wanted to start it or not, like I started it. And over that summer, I, just tried to perfect that as early as I could before I did all the supplemental ones. So I did a lot of writing in that summer, which I think was really helpful. And another thing I'll say is that like sometimes like essays are gonna be very similar for different schools. And this is what helped me with like one of the MIT essays, the one that was like, why do you want to study like your major? For me was physics. I had a really hard time with the MIT essays at first just because I was so nervous and like I was so intimidated because like, oh my god, it's MIT, what do I even write? But before that, I had actually done a very similar essay for another school that like I still cared about, but it wasn't my first choice. And because I was like more relaxed and not stressing out too much, I ended up doing really good writing. And I was able to use that as kind of inspiration for what I could write in MIT's essay that was very similar.
I think this is going to be immensely helpful for whoever watches it and is looking to apply to colleges like MIT. Thank you so much for your time. Do you have any last words you'd like to share?
Yeah, so I would say just try not to stress too much and try not to like worry about things that haven't even happened yet and like might not happen, because I spent a lot of time like in high school just like worrying and worrying and worrying, like, oh, what if I don't get into like any of these places, like, and I already kind of assumed that I wouldn't get in. I kind of had the mentality like expect the worst, hope for the best, but I feel like expecting the worst didn't really let me hope for the best, because I was just so like convinced that I wouldn't even have a chance. But then it turned out that the best case scenario ended up happening, which was like the first college I heard back from, which was like my top choice. I got in and it was pretty much over before it began. So don't necessarily count yourself out, because then you could waste all that time worrying about something that never even ends up happening. And also, I think one of the things that made me stress so much was watching a lot of social media about like people like just giving a bunch of different advice and stuff. Like, it's helpful in moderation, but I would say when you overconsume it, that's when it begins to become a problem. And when you don't have the right mindset about it, when you're like you're comparing yourself in like an unhealthy way, then that can make it unhelpful. If you watch in moderation and make sure you're watching like authentic stuff and not something like, you know, some accounts like they very well could be made up. Like if you're hearing like directly from the person, like something like this, it's like very different, I'd say. And I'd say if you're gonna like consume college admissions content on social media, watch something like this where you're hearing from the real person who made the application, rather than like someone who like just writes like this person did that and that and that, where there's no like evidence and things could be exaggerated, because then that sets like impossible standards.
For sure. Thank you so much for your time. I wish you a life of success. Congrats on getting into MIT. Let's stay connected. See where it goes.
Thank you so much.